Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the facilities breakout session in today's webinar on law school logistics in the COVID-19 world. I hope everyone is enjoying the sessions thus far today. My name is Maura Fowler, and I'm the Associate Director of Operations and Logistics at the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. Like many of you here today, either attending or on the panel, I have been tasked with mapping out the physical details of bringing faculty, staff, and students back to campus this fall. No small task, I think we can all agree. I have been asked to assist in moderating the conversation today. I think it's fair to say that most of us in the operations world, whether you're an administrative dean, a facilities manager, or some sort of operational coordinator, pride ourselves on our ability to create elegantly thorough plans, protocols, policies with all of the contingencies in mind. And in the current climate, with its ever-changing guidelines, health and economic risks, and no clear end in sight, this is proving to be particularly difficult for our sense of precision and organization. We're trying to be comfortable with acceptable solutions, or as we joke here at SJQ, the least worst option. So that is why today's forum is so helpful. It allows us to collectively share our challenges and what we're doing to address and overcome them as business units with the always overriding need to keep our people healthy and safe. I'd like to introduce you today to our panel. These are experienced, innovative, capable leaders who are also working through these daily challenges of getting us back on campus as August approaches. First, we have Dean Richard Bird, Associate Dean for Finance and Administration at Seattle University School of Law. Good morning, or I guess good afternoon. Next, Dean Joseph Kearney, Assistant Dean for Strategic Initiatives and Director of Safety and Security. That is a big title at UIC John Marshall Law School. And third, Dean Jeffrey Dodge, Associate Dean for Academic and Student Services at Penn State Dickinson Law School. Welcome, distinguished panel, and thank you for your time today. Gentlemen, I want to turn the time over to each of you to introduce yourselves and give us a synopsis of how your institution is dealing with the challenges posed to your facility by bringing people back to campus during the pandemic. We'll start with Dean Bird, then hear from Dean Kearney, followed by Dean Dodge. And after your introductions, we'll dive into the question and answer portion of the session. While our panelists are introducing themselves, if those of you attending could think about your top 3 facilities issues related to COVID-19 that you would like to have discussed in this session, please feel free to type these questions in the Q&A section, and I'll go ahead and field them with the panel. Dean Bird, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Welcome, everybody. I'm in Seattle. That's why we're Seattle University. I'll just give you a quick update on sort of first thing as you go and look at our situation. We've been out since March. We're still out. We finished up spring term online. We taught all of summer term will be online. We'll scheduled to start fall on the semester system. And I note that because the rest of the university is on the quarter system. So they generally start a little later than us, but we'll be bringing students back on for orientation, or at least all of this is scheduled, and we're ready to pivot if necessary. But the week of August 17th, and we'll see some of our staff begin to phase in work beginning in the building Monday, August 3rd. Give you an idea where we are. I will let you know quickly because I think anything about facilities is related to the region. We've had a very active governor, very serious about the shutdown, very serious about this, following medical advice very closely. We're in phase 2 of 4 phases. It's been extended and put on hold. He's locked down for a couple weeks, no changes for several more weeks now. And I think Washington overall is doing a good job with his leadership. We do have a mandatory face covering requirement in place. Seattle University is a private institution, so I'll give that in the context of where we are. We're working through centralized support as well as individual support that the law school does. And so a lot of when I look at facilities is what is ours, what is the university's, and a lot of it falls to us after the university sets the general policy. And I suspect that's true at a lot of institutions as well. Sullivan Hall is the building that we have. We're very fortunate that all of our services are in one building. The building is only used by law students in our law program, which is very good for us because we look at a very mature student, much as everybody else does. But in general, other undergraduates aren't using our building. We have our own library in the building as well, all of our student services, and we have a small food service location, which will be mainly grab and go in the fall. As we look at the facility, we're looking at safety and health with regard to students, staff, and faculty. And that's in the classrooms, in the study space. It's around access. As we've broken down our building, we've looked at our campus partnerships. Usually we work with public safety on public safety issues, which include, I would say mostly because of our location in the central part of Seattle, up on Capitol Hill, has been about campus safety around non-SU, non-community members and how we can ensure the safety of our students, staff, and community faculty as well. But the reality is that now we're talking about how we ensure the same safety for them and also include health issues. So we've we've developed access systems for it. We're gonna maintain our building as locked and use swipe card access for that. I think that's maybe standard when you can do that. On our campus, we're lucky because our building is only about 20 years old, and we implemented, when we built the building, we put in a lot of security. So we work with our facilities people on the layout. We've done a lot of routing. We've walked every foot of this building and talked about it. Our facilities people have done a good job in laying out some initial diagrams. And one of the key things I'd say right here about with your facilities people is your partnership. And they were very good to us with regard to sending us layouts and then letting us provide feedback on that. We've made some suggestions because they realize that we know the use of the building the best. And so we've worked hard with them on developing that. The striping is actually going to be done next week. We're using a combination of floor signs and then also wall-mounted signs. For safety purposes, we try to stay away from the individual floor-mounted signs, but we're going to end up with some of those. We try to be very careful about those because they become obstacles for students, staff, and community members. One of the things we are going to do is for fall term, right now, we're going to limit visitors. We're not going to have visitors. Our plan for student services is to do as much as we've done online, and we'll continue to do that, but we will have a presence in the building. But we're going to really try to get students into the habit of continuing to use Zoom for individual meetings with counselors, for all of their services in those areas. Let me see if that's sort of my quick on that. We've had some challenges. We're working on equipment to go with the building, but that's probably where I am. Oh, I will say briefly, we're working on capacity issues. As far as academic scheduling goes, we are going to be offering a large amount of our classes will be done online, but we will be doing our first year right now, a portion of those classes and required upper division classes in a hybrid fashion. Every one of our classes, no matter whether it's scheduled to be in person, a hybrid fashion, where there's some in person alternating with some people in one day and some people in another day, will still be available online. That's created some challenges for our technology staff, but we've been able to sort of recreate a situation that we believe will allow the students in the Zoom to participate with the students in the classroom. It's been challenging. We've taken several runs at it, but we're very confident now about where we are. So I'll kind of just leave that with that, because I know some of the other people have got other stuff that's similar, but some different stuff too.
All right, thank you. Dean Kearney.
Great. Well, thanks for having us here, us meeting the law school, John Marshall. I am Assistant Dean for Strategic Initiatives at UIC John Marshall, as Mara said at the outset. And since December, as she also said, I've been also serving as the Interim Director of Safety and Security. Just a brief side note, when I actually accepted that appointment back in December, I think both the Dean and I, for a variety of reasons, thought it would probably only be a matter of a couple of weeks. And I think she even said something like, well, hopefully nothing too big happens while you're in this role. So, and here we are. But it's been very interesting. Of course, in both capacities, I work very closely with the Dean and other stakeholders to help plan for the return to campus. I'll just give you kind of the current state of where we kind of find ourselves, kind of like Richard just did. We are located in Chicago's downtown Loop Business District. So obviously lots going on down here too for other reasons. We have about 200 faculty and staff members, around 1,000 students. And then behind the scenes, we have 20 security staff members and 70, that would be great if we did, 7 facilities maintenance staff members. So we do have a 24/7 operation in that respect. We have 4 connected buildings that range from 3 to 17 stories. 9 of those floors, actually, it's kind of an interesting story, are part of a commercial condominium association. So that adds a complexity to implement some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. But luckily, UIC is the majority owner in the building. So that helps when you've got 51% of the votes. And I'm actually on the board along with the CFO for UIC and the head of facilities for UIC. All told, we've got about 280,000 usable square feet on our campus. And it is just law students here. Interesting story. The 280,000 square feet kind of represents the high point of where we used to be back when we had about 1,600 students. So that kind of is a useful fact as we think about how things are going to look going forward. Like Richard, Illinois is what I would characterize as a fairly strong state in terms of the regulatory structure surrounding COVID. We're currently actually in phase 4 of 5. The 5th one meaning you've got a vaccine and everything's hunky-dory. So we're expecting to be in phase 4 for quite some time, if not going back to phase 3, given the situation, nationally with other states. So, phase 4 is things like no gatherings over 50 individuals, face coverings required indoors, etc. But to observe phase 4 this past Monday, we actually did do a partial reopening for some students, faculty, and staff, with the caveat that everyone needs a reservation or prior approval by the dean to access the campus. This can be done in a variety of ways, and this would take us up through the beginning of school on August 24th, although as you'll see later, we're going to continue a lot of these protections. The first way, we created an email address that a few of us received, including me and the dean, called access@jmls.edu. And students, for instance, could ask to clean out their locker. That's happened many times. Someone could ask to get a book. These are discrete requests, and they were limited to 30 minutes. You can request more, but most people don't need that. The second thing is why I've been dreaming in 6 feet for the past couple months, and I'm sure all of you have too. We've identified 137 at this point, at least, probably gonna have a few more physically distanced seats and study rooms throughout campus that students can reserve. And what we did was we built out our library study room reservation system to include all these new seats, some of which are in our smaller classrooms that would not be usable during COVID anyways. We just might as well squeeze out a couple seats there. And then security actually checks that system multiple times a day and makes sure that our common spreadsheet is updated with all of our people coming on campus, so we know who's going to be where, and that's also for contact tracing purposes. We've labeled all the chairs, labeled all the spaces. they all, have like the 9th floor, Carrel number 1 would be 9-1 as an example. And then we've put yellow tape on the ground underneath the chair to discourage moving of chairs. And believe it or not, we've already had 2 students try to move chairs next to each other. So I had to dispatch an officer up there and give some tough love. So it's going to happen. We realize that, but we're trying to do all the precautions we can. And then faculty and staff that are wanting to come on campus, they already had to submit an approval. We'll have them, we'll put the call out again for the fall for people that want to work on campus. We're not expecting a lot of people will. Right now, we've got about 25 or 30 faculty members and staff members that really feel like they want to be on campus. And we're trying to make sure that they're not interacting. And in some cases, we're not even scheduling them on the same floor at the same time. So we're doing the best we can with that. Obviously, building access remains restricted. Face coverings required throughout campus unless you're in a closed office or while you're eating or drinking. We've installed, like Richard said, hundreds of signs around campus. We are using some floor signs for distancing. Anyone that comes on campus must complete an online Qualtrics wellness self-screening test. It includes the questions that we're all familiar with about symptoms, in Chicago's case, whether someone traveled to one of the states that's on the list that would require a 14-day quarantine upon return. And it's a pretty, IT did a great job on it, and we can really easily update it, as I'm sure we'll have to, every week something new pops up. And of course, the temperature, you have to take the temperature ahead of time. If someone presents without doing the wellness exam, and by the way, they show a QR code when they get to security. But if they have not done the wellness exam, we have 3 privacy booths located just off the lobby where we've got no touch thermometers. We have one of those tablets on order where you can walk right up to it and it'll show you your temperature. We've got the protocol written on the wall so that they know what to do. We've got gloves, we've got disinfectants so that they would have to take their temperature, and then they have to use one of the computers in that little privacy area to complete that wellness exam and show an officer once that QR code pops up. Other measures briefly, elevators, we're encouraging 2 per cab at this time. We've actually reprogrammed the elevators to allow more efficient service to certain floors that are going to have heavier use. Certain elevators, for instance, didn't go to the library floors. It was sort of an internal security thing, but we've changed that so that there's more efficient service. The main entrance, which is right on State Street here, beautiful Chicago, is entrance only. Anyone that is going to leave campus goes through one of our other entrances that used to service the clinic space. So it's a one-way hallway. You go straight out. You don't have to interact with anybody. And we've got the signage for that too. Obviously, individuals must remain in the area that they reserved. Like I said, we've been trying to police that. We've got a lot of cameras around campus. We also have roving officers. Bathrooms, we're suggesting 1 in, 1 out. To that effect, we've installed lit signs on the exterior of the bathrooms that are motion sensor. So after 5 minutes of no motion in a bathroom, the light on the outside goes out. We're hoping that that will better allow aerosol particles that might be in the air from flushing to fall to the ground. And then finally, quickly, I might be a little bit over my time, so I apologize. In terms of the fall and beyond, probably spring too, the vast majority of the things that I just discussed will be in place. Most of probably 75%, 80% of the courses will be online only. We're hoping to have some 1L courses be in person so that every 1L would at least a couple days a week maybe be on campus, just to have that traditional law school experience. And then also courses where, like Trialad, where it's pedagogically important to be in person. We're trying to squeeze those in too. And that's been one of the biggest challenges, I think, for us. I mean, our largest classroom can typically hold 140. Now we're talking about 34, which is almost perfect, 25%, which is the current guidance. We didn't know that when we measured it. Most common areas will remain closed. Like Richard, we're actually separate from this. We were going to be installing in August anyway, a fresh market concept that's completely self-service. So that will be available to some extent. And then finally, we're prepared, as I mentioned above, to go fully online and lock down the buildings again if either the city or the state go back to phase 3.
All right, thank you so much. A lot of work, both of you. All right, Dean Dodge, let's hear from you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Dodge, and I'm the Associate Dean for Academic and Student Services at Penn State Dickinson Law in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I feel like we're going west to east here in our chat. But also, I am incredibly envious, I have to say, of my panelists who actually are able to be in an office. I don't know if it's your office, but I'm in my home office, i.e. spare bedroom. So that's the beautiful background here, nautical themed. We have been working very hard, and similar to Dean Kearney's experience, I was asked literally 1 month prior to the pandemic beginning if I would oversee the facilities and security team. I have done so in the past, but was not anticipating, obviously, a pandemic would offer all types of fun challenges, especially in my first year at this institution. So I've worked in higher education for close to 15 years at 3 different law schools and overseen facilities and parts at all of them. This certainly has been a challenge. I'll start first with the academic operations, sort of the core mission work. What we're doing at Dickinson Law and Penn State in general is the HyFlex. So lots of modes of the delivery of education. Our 3 primary modes of delivering legal education this fall are remote synchronous, a mix, so in person half of the class on Zoom, all synchronous, and then an in-person delivery. And what we did was we worked through some contingency plans when things were becoming clear that fall wasn't just going to be a return to normal. And working with the faculty and working with the students, we set up categories for priorities of classes. So working with them and getting feedback, we kind of understood that the community thought it was really important, the top priority, to get 1L courses either in person or with that mixed delivery so that they could physically come to the building if it was permitted. Next, it was the required 2nd and 3rd year courses. Next, it was the large enrollment bar tested courses. And so we essentially created 7 categories. Experiential learning is category 4. And then what we've done is we've assigned one of those modes of delivery as the presumption for those categories of courses. So what it allowed us to do, I think, pretty successfully was really to allow the stakeholders to give views and opinions on what should be in the building if it was possible. So there was some sort of consensus around that. Once those categories for the priorities were determined, we applied the mode of delivery to each of them. We reviewed the schedule and then determined, do we have the rooms to be able to handle these? As part of that process, as was indicated, we walked around with a tape measure and literally measured everything 6 foot from each other. We've identified the exact chairs. We have schematics of every classroom and which seats people should be in. And once we knew the capacities of the classrooms, which ranged between 20% of its normal capacity and up to just shy of 50% was our largest one. And it was really wide ranging. The larger classrooms were closer to like 40%, but our auditorium, probably no surprise, narrow seats, narrow rows, that 6 foot, I mean, it went from 200 plus to 40 pretty quickly. So we really had to assess every classroom and then applying these priority categories and this HyFlex mode, we have now, assigned the classes. From there, we engaged with our stakeholders again. So for students, faculty, and staff, if they needed any kind of adjustments to their work environment, i.e. they want to teach fully remotely, counter to whatever the assigned category was, they need to teach fully remotely. Our institution has not asked for documentation, not asked for any information, just simply asked that you let us know if this is an adjustment that you need on the teaching side. And we've applied the same process for students and staff. If you need to continue working from home and you can't start returning on the schedule that we've developed starting August 3rd to start returning in person, that's fine. Just let us know via this remote adjustment request form was what we ended up calling it. So that was really useful because the next part of the process as part of the facilities management for academic purposes was to then make adjustments based on who was making requests. Like the other speakers, I'd say we're probably close to 70% will be fully remote. And that's primarily because all of the smaller and larger enrollment elective courses were designated to all be remote. And then also small enrollment bar tested subjects, they also were designated to be remote. So we've now assigned rooms, and we're soon to announce the specifics to the students as we're kind of wrapping up the remote adjustment request process. An interesting thing that we learned through this process is as we were really envisioning what a student's life would be like, well, it would all work out on paper, right? These classes would be remote, these classes would be in person. We identified some challenges, obviously, with commuting, getting to spaces. You know, if you have a remote class between 2 in-persons, or more likely a hybrid and a remote and then another hybrid, or a mixed use. So what we're also doing is designating a few rooms as Zoom rooms that students will be able to log into. But the overarching theme that we have communicated to students is you're only to be in the building when you have an academic purpose to be there. Arrive before class, gather no more than 5 minutes prior to the start of that class in front of the room if you need to. We have designated areas, maintain 6 foot, and as soon as your classes are done for the day, you know, handle whatever business you need to attend to, print whatever out, and then leave. This is not a space to kind of exist like it used to exist. This summer, I had the honor of serving as the director of CLIO's Pre-Law Summer Institute. And I share this because we moved the entire program, which is traditionally remote for 52 plus years, online. I'm very grateful for the experience, even though it was a lot of extra work on top of all the logistics planning, because it gave us a sense of kind of how the fall might work and ways we might be able to enhance it. And one improvement I'm very excited to share a little bit about is that in the spring, when we moved to remote courses, we had a student support tech student from the IT area sitting in on the classes just to make sure that they were going well and if the professors needed functionality support, et cetera. But in the CLIO program, we had that person serve a more active role, sort of watching the chat room, moderating any questions or hand raises. And we're going to actually apply what we ended up doing in that program to fall. And so for courses that are remote or courses that are the mixed use, where there's half on Zoom and half in person, that tech support will actually, since they are a law student, sort of do a little more and actually help the professors, sort of TA style, actively manage the classroom. So I know that's not facilities related directly, but I think when I hear a lot of faculty who are concerned about kind of connecting classrooms to virtual classrooms, that's one way we're trying to enhance the experience and make it a little better both for students and for faculty. Just to kind of go through a little rapidly here on the building operations, similar to my colleagues, we've designated an entrance door and an exit door. Both are ADA compliant. We will have masks provided by the law school. Masks are required, or some sort of face covering is required when in the building, when attending class. The only space that a mask or face covering is not required is in one's private office when they are alone. So we have an entrance and exit. We also have some flows and routes. So we've created some, one-way highways in the building. Frankly, I know that there's been a lot of research that maybe those are sort of more hassle than they're worth, but in our particular environment, and maybe in yours, and when I say more hassle than it's worth, there have been some that have called into question if people are just walking by each other within 6 feet, are they really, is there a likelihood of the contact in the air and everything, a transmission of the disease? Even aside from whether or not it's needed medically, what we've realized is, the way our building flows, the students sort of gather in a certain place and then enter classrooms and usually exit the same way. So we have entrance and exit doors where it's possible for those classrooms, and our little one-way highway is to actually ensure that the incoming doesn't intersect with the outgoing, that with the designated doors kind of, and the flow is to try to gather people in and out so that they don't have to stand around one another. Lots of signage. I won't go into all that detail, but signage for direction, signage for health and safety purpose, signages on bathrooms. Seating adjustments, we've removed hundreds of chairs from common spaces. We are also pushing together some of the common space tables where we can create a 6 foot distance. So even if a student, if they want to sit with another student, we ensure that they're 6 feet apart and we have a designated place where those chairs are set. You know, it really allowed us, I don't know about other institutions, but part of the facilities matrix is also storage. Where am I going to put all these things, you know? And so removing them from common spaces then leads to where do I put them now? So we were able to close off a classroom or two to be able to put, you know, chairs and tables and whatnot, but allowing kind of tables to be pushed together with designated chairs more than 6 feet apart allowed us to keep some of that out too, and maybe create a little bit of a social connection where they're between classes or whatnot. Cleaning, obviously our custodial team has received enhanced cleaning instruction. They have new and interesting chemicals and products. All of our podiums, we're leaving wipes and spray so that faculty and students, candidly, when they use those spaces, can wipe them down. Same thing in the common areas. Every table set will have a spray or set of wipes. And it really is, if you use it, you need to wipe it. And that's the culture that we'll be pushing out to the students, to the faculty, and to the staff. You know, we're doing some deeper facilities management work, you know, replacing filters a little faster. And again, there's not a whole lot of science or information that those things are how this is transmitted, but we're just taking precautions, flushing systems and whatnot. Things we, you know, maybe we do it every other year just as part of a routine, but we're planning on doing twice this year, just in an abundance of caution. The other thing that we're doing on the cleaning side is that we've also identified that we're going to clean classrooms in particular twice a day. So we have a routine already for once a day, but we have found a midday time period for each of our classrooms that the custodial team will come in and do a refresh. And then the rooms will all be locked immediately after the last class. So we are not making the building available in the evening. We're not making, or the classrooms, we're not making them available in the evening for folks to come and use. We are treating those as, when they're done in use, we lock them and then we do a deep clean, and they only then get opened for the next academic purpose. The last thing I'll share, yesterday we had, you know, as everyone is having with all of their states, you know, new information, so a new executive order that spoke to events, indoors and outdoor events. So we were able to hold some kinds of events, but the university and the law school were choosing to not have events in person. But the new guidance has now made it even more important that we made that decision, and that we can't in our state hold gatherings of more than 25 individuals. And so our general policy to student organizations and faculty is that, you know, class is the only reason people are to be in the classrooms. All of these other events and activities we can find ways to do remotely, probably needing to be creative, and some like hearing that and some don't. But we can find creative other ways to deliver that, promote community, and still have a vibrant student life and student experience. So I will end there.
Well, thank you to all three of you. I now have 3 people to reach out to with every question that I may have about facilities. It sounds like we're all doing really similar work, but there are some distinct differences as well. And there's a question that's popped up here. How are others enforcing the Qualtrics survey if they don't have security officers or similar resources? So this would be to Dean Bird and to Dean Dodge. Dean Kearney has some security on site. For those of us who don't have that resource, and beyond just the Qualtrics survey, I think this speaks to like enforcement of issues, whether it be masks, testing on site, and whether it's a Qualtrics survey or an attestation that you're having people take. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you're dealing with that aspect of coming back on site?
Joe, you want me to jump in first? Yeah, okay. Everybody's going to have to take a survey every morning. It's a standard. I think Joe hit all the points of the survey that we have on it. It's a quick thing that'll be students, faculty, and staff. Visitors can only be scheduled, and this includes visitors for our law clinic. They'll be given a visitor slot to do it. Visitors will be treated a little different than our community. Once you take the survey, you receive a email back as to whether or not you're approved for the day. So the issue is you could be asked to show that. We have not at this point decided on any check system. We're sort of waiting for guidance from the university, but I think what's going to happen is that I think we're going to be in a situation where it's just going to be expected for students, and we may get lists from public safety because they have a record of that with regard to how many people are doing it. But the reality is, if you saw somebody, if I was in the building or public safety when they were walking through, or a staff person, and they appeared to not be well, they could say, hey, have you taken the survey and can you show it to me? But we consider these to be student conduct issues, just the same as they would be for wearing a face covering. We'll address that through the student conduct system.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I'll add, we don't have security at our building. We don't have a designated officer. Of course, humorously, we were in process to actually get our own designated officer as part of the Penn State Police Force, and that process is not yet done. What we're currently doing, or what we're planning on doing, the current plans are that we have a staff that works in our local cafe in the building, and similar to Dean Kearney, you know, we're looking at sort of the grab and go options as opposed to needing a person in that space. And so to support the employability of folks that may be impacted, their normal jobs may be impacted, we're anticipating that we would be using and working with that team at the entrances just to check. Now, of course, I don't expect them to have any kind of enforcement or authority or go beyond checking and doing general work at the door in terms of letting folks in. And similar to the other speakers, you know, only folks in our community who show signs that they, you know, completed that survey will be permitted in, and only invited guests who are met at the door by an administrator or a faculty member will be let in. But anyway, so we're sort of working with folks to repurpose them into that kind of role, since we don't have that staff. But again, it is supporting, you know, it's supporting their employment options, which otherwise we wouldn't have a purpose or need right now for them.
Very good. Another question that was posed to the panel, and I think I'll start with you, Dean Kearney, on this question, was one of the attendees is concerned about the limitations of entrances and exits, and the challenges that pose to people who are maybe coming into clinical situations where English may not be their first language. There may be cognitive disabilities. We also at our institution are thinking about terms of people who may have hearing disabilities or sight impairments. Have you thought through some of these challenges? It sounds like, you know, you've worked a lot. You've got many different entrances and exits that you need to think about with 4 different buildings. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's good points, and you just brought up, Mara, some good points about you know, hearing and sight and those considerations. I guess it's typical ADA to begin with, but yeah, when you're shutting down 3/4 of your entrances and people become accustomed to using these, it's another wrinkle, it's another level for sure. So yeah, it is interesting too, because I think I mentioned earlier that the outdoor will now be the door that typically people would enter into, go into our clinical spaces. So yes, we do have in that space, we've got 9 clinics altogether, but in that space we've got, for instance, the Veterans Clinic, and then you've got the Pro Bono Clinic, and then sometimes International Human Rights Clinic, all 3 of which could have some language issues or other issues, Mara, like you pointed out. I think I'm just going to punt and say we haven't really figured that out. We do have signage. We don't have, for instance, have Braille signage though on the outside. It's kind of interesting. And I know the dean's a detail person, so I've got a call with her after this. So I'm going to light her hair on fire yet again, so we can talk about this. But no, I think that's a great concern, and you know, I think maybe the subtext of that question is, how comfortable do people feel, right? regardless of whether they're able to wayfind their way to where they want to go, are there other issues that could come up if they can't get where they need to go, right? From that perspective. So, did you like my non-answer?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're grappling with it too. And I think a lot of it comes down to sensitivity in this time. I think that when we're working with our staff, we're discussing issues of sensitivity training to not just come down hard like a hammer on somebody if they're not acting appropriately, to kind of suss out what the issue may be there, right? That there may be some sensory issues, and to work through that before assuming that they're just not complying. So it's complicated stuff, for sure. Okay, I have another question for you gentlemen. So this attendee wants to know, they're planning to close some of their common areas to reduce transmission opportunities, locker rooms, student kitchens, lounges. And so you all three of you have discussed actually ways in which you're limiting the facility. If you are planning to have students on site more than just the 5 minutes or after class, and encouraging them, not to gather, we are allowing students to work on site if they're with like law review or labs. Have any of you that this may pertain to thought about these common areas and how you're going to regulate them, or some guidelines for that? And I don't know who to shoot this question to. Who feels like they've got something to say about it? Dean Dodge?
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, I think one thing that's been very useful in this process is that we have tried to include the students as the program, or as our planning develops and it evolves. We've tried to include the students with FYIs, opportunities for feedback. So for example, I sent them a rather dense 8-page overview of what the facilities usage is going to look like in fall. And I said it's evolving, we're receiving information, there's information that is not yet on here, we're still figuring out testing options, in particular in the contact tracing. Gave them a week to respond. The Student Bar Association collected feedback, they provided on it. So I also think, I guess what I'm getting at is, I think that this is about establishing a trusting relationship with your students, maintaining that throughout, being transparent, being clear about what the expectations are going to be, and not just when they arrive that morning. I mean, I know it sounds strange, but I wanted them to know how the restroom process was going to work. I wanted them to know, like, they're not going to see as many chairs in the library, like the building is going to look different. And I wanted them to be prepared for that. And it wasn't it's obviously not being done in a way to not support them. It's actually being done fully to support them and their health and their safety. And so, I think I send an email every week that provides updates from all the areas and departments. We sort of centralize communication. In my office, I send out these emails. So I think it's just about giving them the information so that the uncertainty starts to lessen and they aren't surprised. I find the dissatisfaction will be mostly stemming from feeling like they didn't get to communicate it to, or they didn't have an opportunity to even just write that impulsive email about how frustrated they are. Now, of course, it was interesting, our Student Bar Association president, and we have a great relationship with the student body overall, but he was quite humored with the responses that he got, which, as you can imagine, varied from, why are they making us wear a mask and all of the politics of that, to why aren't they just going fully remote? It's not worth all this. And then a good amount in between. But I'm happy to say, I mean, less than 5% of the student body even cared to provide feedback. And I would say of those that provided feedback, 80% of them just appreciated getting some information. Not knowing, what was to come for fall was worse than having information, even if they didn't like it.
Dean Bird, I'm curious. I don't remember you saying that your building would be limited in terms of student use. Things are complicated, obviously, with this past graduating class, right? And their preparation for the bar. So already a tricky political issue that all of us are dealing with. Are you providing space for those students to study for the bar, prep for the bar, or are they now considered visitors?
Well, Washington was the second state to provide a diploma privilege. And we went from a need to probably support about 150 students, which was going to be pretty difficult for those that were locally that would utilize it, to 7. And so as of July 1st, we got university permission to open up for those 7. Basically, it's been great. They are in the library. They have assigned study carrels. They come in, and actually it's such a small number, it's an insignificant task for us to provide. They've all have access to the building through their door unlocked. They're here certain hours. We've got some staff presence. We also have some public safety walkthroughs. A lot of our public safety, they sort of walk us through on a cycle for campus. So we've been able to do that. They actually have access to no other services. So it's on the honor system, and all 7 have been great. I've checked in with a couple of them on some of the walkthroughs. It's a 7-day-a-week service from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., I believe, is the hours. It's worked out really well for us, but again, it's been a very small number. We will continue that through, there's a July bar, and there's also a September bar in Washington. We'll continue that service for them as long as we can. We're slightly concerned about capacity issues because our law library has, we're at about 20 to 25% of the capacity when we reopen. So that'll be something that we'll just deal with at that time, but it's worked out really well. When we do reopen, we won't have assigned carrels, but it just turned out to be easier for all of our staff and for the cleaning staff to know exactly where they're going to be.
Great, thank you. I don't have any new questions from the attendees, but since I have you as a captive audience, if I may gratuitously ask you a question of my own. All of you have spoken readily of your academic plan and your space considerations and your staffing considerations. I'm curious to know what your communication plan is when and if somebody tests positive in a classroom. So student A tests positive, and how do you plan to communicate that out to your community? What is your 24-hour pivot plan? And I think I'd like to hear from each of you. So if I can start with Dean Kearney, and we'll work our way up.
So we did have our security sergeants, who are the shift supervisors, complete the Johns Hopkins contact tracing module. I actually haven't completed it, but I understand that they got A's on it. They told me that they got A's, so that's good. But that I think we're hoping to have security serve as the contact tracing unit. With everything else that has gone on, just implementing and getting up to our phase 4 standard, we haven't really gotten the contact tracing operational yet. Thankfully, we haven't had the need to, but we do have with all of our reservation systems and tracking mechanisms, we do have a pretty good ability, plus our cameras. Early on, before we went out, we actually had to use our cameras and follow a student that we thought might have had COVID to see what that student did, and the student was hugging people, so it was one of those things where you're like, oh, the tidal wave's coming and the pandemic's here, and then it turned out she didn't have COVID. But yeah, so I think we're pretty confident in being able to identify the smallest group of people that could have potentially had contact with someone who tests positive.
Dean Dodge?
Yeah, our plan is very similar. I went through the Johns Hopkins contact tracing course, which I recommend for folks. Frankly, I learned a lot about what coronavirus is, and I feel like I can speak I would not even go anywhere near the word knowledgeably, but a little more knowledgeably about what we're dealing with as a result. I feel like I at least understand when the facilities folks are talking about cleaning and process what we're doing. But I do recommend though that contact tracing program. I think it's only like $40. It was free for a while actually, which is when I did it, and it was very educational. I think our plan generally is, should we have a student, faculty, or staff member be identified as having COVID-19, we would go through the contact tracing process, identify what spaces they've been in, who they've been around, ask that those folks, watch their symptoms. We'd monitor that. That individual would be required to stay home, obviously. And I'm thinking, I believe the policy of Penn State is 14 days at minimum until after the symptoms pass. We also though are working with, we're sort of in the beginning stages of getting some testing services. Penn State is overall, so an RFP went out a few weeks ago, and so they're anticipating that testing options will be available at every location of Penn State University, some 22 campuses, which the benefit is being part of a big university. But I will say that over the course of the process at the university level to figure these things out, I had simultaneously reached out to companies like Rite Aid and CVS and all of those kinds of organizations, because they were beginning to offer sort of return to work, return to school type testing services. So I also have that information readily available should the university services not be what we're hoping it will be. We also are prepared to engage, our own testing service on top of our contact tracing efforts as regulated through Penn State.
And Dean Bird, do you have anything to add?
I really don't have anything to add other than ours is our process will be more led with the university through public safety and our centralized health services center, but they're still working with us on the individuals just the same as the other institutions. So.
Okay, great. Well, we have a few minutes left. I guess, to speak to the uniqueness of each of your institutions, everyone is unique, in terms of whether it's your size or your public or your private, you're in the city, you're not in the city, the age of your building, your budget. What would you categorize currently as your biggest asset, facility-wise, moving into fall 2020? What's your biggest challenge? And I'm gonna start with you again, Dean Bird.
I think probably one of our biggest assets is ever since we've been in this building for the last 20 years, we've prided ourselves on flexibility and serving our students. And that comes from our community, our faculty, and our staff. And I think that's our strength. That's our strength going in. We also enjoy a building. The design of our building in a lot of ways is very supportive of this, in that the designers wanted a lot of community space, so we have some larger spaces. They designed the classrooms to be sort of spacious. I think our dimensions, each student has about 34 inches wide and 2 feet deep on all of the minimum space. So that allows our spacing to work pretty well in our classrooms, and that's just desktop space in addition to the chair space. That's sort of it. I think the biggest challenges on the opposite side is, what do we do in some of those areas that are so community oriented, and how do we create walkways? How do we create safe spots for students to stop? How do we keep furniture in place? I think we've got some good creative ideas. Somebody had mentioned about furniture, we have more furniture than we begin to space stuff out. It's what you do with it. We're not going to let it go out of the building. We don't think it'd ever come back, and it could be damaged. So we're creating areas where we don't want to have anything stacked, but at the same time, how do you kind of conceal it or lay it around so that it's not being used? And Nobody wants to come in and see a bunch of caution tape around an area, but we're working on all of that. Signage is really helping, and how that signage goes on, and then how it's safe for students, like Plasticoat is signage as opposed to paper signage, everything like that. So those are some of the challenges.
I think we can agree. Dean Kearney.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest asset that we have for our facilities is just our size. You know, we're not just one building, we've got multiple buildings. I think it was Richard's point early on about, or maybe it was Jeff, about the storage. We have our most recent acquisition is a building we call 19 West Jackson, and it's actually a beautiful building. It's one of the last timber lofts that was built in the city of Chicago right after the Chicago fire. But it's a huge vacuous space, 3 floors, that runs basically a city block. And we used to use it for events until we realized that there's no occupancy permit for it. So that's just between us and the law, right, guys? So we can't use it for anything right now, but we can use it for storage. So that was a perfect thing. You know, the maintenance guy said, well, where are we going to put all this stuff? You know, this is not traditional storage. We're taking everything out of the classrooms, 19 West. So that, I would say that's the greatest asset. In terms of the challenge, I think it's probably something that used to be our greatest asset pre-COVID, and that's our location. Because, you know, Chicago's got such a robust public transportation system. So many of our students rely on that public transportation to get to campus. So if we ever do open up to a point where it's more than just the 1Ls, for instance, people may just not want to feel comfortable in getting on public transit. You know, I actually, my wife had to take the car day. I've been driving in every day and accruing those massive parking bills down here. But I felt comfortable enough finally. Normally I probably would have, you know, maybe even walked. We're just a couple of miles from downtown. But I felt comfortable enough finally, given the phase we're in, to jump on the one of the trains. And it was fine. It was comfortable, but it's clear that 90% of the people are not on that train. I got up on the platform at like 7 o'clock. It would have been packed, you know, pre-COVID, and there were 3 people that got on at my station, and there were 3 people on the train car, and that's fine. But if there's 10, and all of a sudden everybody, so I think that's going to be one of our challenges, is how do we get people to feel comfortable to come downtown once we move into whatever the next phase looks like.
So I'd say at Penn State Dickinson Law, the greatest asset really is our size. We're a small law school. We have relationships with all the faculty, all the staff, all the students, really one-on-one relationships, just being so small. And so I do feel like even if we run into enforcement issues, we have people that have relationships with every single person. And as I said before, we've really, you know, fostered a community of trust. If you ask any Dickinson Law student, faculty, or staff, you know, I would say almost every one of them to a T would say the greatest thing they like about Dickinson Law is the community. And so I'm hoping that, you know, that heartbeat of the community continues to extend into the health and safety concerns that are driving our policy makings and our processes, and some of the things that, you know, may be unpleasant, may not be wanted, but are required at this particular time. I do think that our challenge also is related to the community. And I only say that because so many of our students, faculty, and staff are interconnected with one another. They live in the same buildings, the same apartments. There are a lot of people that live right around the law school. And so to sort of disconnect this hub, like this space represents, like, it's their community center. It's where they go, they connect, they support each other. It's where they launch off to dinner from. It's just going to be a very different experience for the students and faculty and staff than it has been for so many years. And so, you know, it's not necessarily a, quote, facilities challenge, but I think it's embodied in the facility, in that the space used to be a place that for many felt joyous and interconnected with others, and it's not going to have that exact shape and form and feeling as it has been in the past. And so that's where I think, in my role, I'm the Dean of Students and work on the academic affairs side. So it's my role to then think about how do we translate that connection to community and disconnect it from facilities and make it more about what we do and what we do together in whatever spaces virtually are available to us.
Well, thank you all for your thoughtful approaches to not an easy situation. And I hope that everybody who attended today's session takes a little something away of, oh, I could do it this way. I think if we learn anything from this, there's no right way to do things or wrong way to do things, but at least we can all see that we're doing it together. And it's good to know that there's a network out there to collaborate with as we kind of navigate all of the uncertainty. So thank you all. Be safe and be well and enjoy the rest of your day.